three of the most well-known straight-decked aircraft carriers, the trio of the mighty Yorktown class. USS Ranger CV-4 was the first purpose-built carrier for the American Navy, but the Yorktowns were the first purpose-built multi-ship members of a class, as the Lexingtons were both originally built as battlecruisers before conversion during construction. The mighty USS Yorktown CV-5, USS Enterprise CV-6, and USS Hornet CV-8. The standalone USS Wasp was CV-7, which is why there's a gap in the three sisters' hull numbers, and she was a much smaller carrier. So, what happened to the mighty trio? Well, today's episode of Fate of, which once again is not a history video, only their fates will be in here, and their commissioning dates. But no context in between, as that's for a history video. So, let's go over the fate of all three. Usually, I go from the first ship to the last, in order of hull number, but today I won't. Enterprise will be last, as she's, Enterprise, and she goes where she wants. People often confuse USS Yorktown CV-5 with the preserved CV-10, an Essex-class carrier named after her, and some people think CV-10 is CV-5 and sunk in 1942, and vice versa. You'd be surprised how many comments on shorts I get about that. Same goes for Hornet and Lexington. Now, the mighty Yorktown was named after the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. She was laid down at the famous and still active today Newport News Shipbuilding in Newport News, Virginia, on May 21st, 1934, launched on April 4th, 1936, and commissioned on September 30th, 1937, and she would go on to gain the following honors, the fewest between the three ships: American Defense Service Medal, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 3 battle stars, and the World War II Victory Medal. However, she would not survive the war. During the Battle of the Coral Sea on May 7, 1942, Lexington CV-2 was so heavily damaged she had to be scuttled, and Yorktown, while heavily damaged, managed to return to Pearl Harbor, and the damages were estimated at a 2-week repair time. Yorktown was back at sea 72 hours later. She would go on to take part in the Battle of Midway with her two sisters, Hornet and Enterprise, between June 4th and June 7th of 1942. She absorbed most of the Japanese aerial attacks, helping out her two sisters. On June 4th, she was crippled after 2 Japanese attacks from the carrier Hiryu would disable her. In fact, she herself would later sink after being scuttled the next day on June 5th. It was a bad day for carriers. Yorktown would take a 23-degree list to port after the attacks and would lose all power. She was taken under tow by the USS Vero, who survived the war. Editor here, I apologize, it's Vireo. On June 6th, Japanese submarine I-168, who would later sink in July 1943, fired torpedoes at the Yorktown, 2 of which hit the Yorktown, and 1 hit the destroyer USS Hammond, who had been providing power for the Yorktown. The destroyer would almost immediately sink as the torpedo broke her back. Yorktown, however, would survive, but she would sink early in the next morning on June 7th, 1942. Nearby ships went to half-mast, and 2 overhead-flying PBY Catalinas dipped their wings in salute of the fallen carrier as she went down. 141 of her crew died, but most of her crew survived. In 1998, her wreck was found on May 19th by none other than the mighty Robert Ballard, aka the finder of a lot of ships, especially Titanic and the Bismarck. He's almost as famous for it as the RV Petrel, who, up until recently, a few years ago, was still finding wrecks. However, what happened to her 2 sisters? USS Hornet CV-8 suffers the same fate as her older sister, as she's often confused with the preserved Hornet CV-12, another Essex class. CV-2, USS Lexington, is also confused with Lexington CV-16, who, despite the hull number, is actually the oldest surviving Essex. Because logic. She was built by Newport News Shipbuilding just like her two sisters. She was laid down on September 25th, 1939, launched on December 14th, 1940, and commissioned on October 20th, 1941. And she would get the following honors, one more than her sister: American Defense Service Medal, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 4 battle stars, one more than Yorktown, and the World War II Victory Medal. However, just like Yorktown, she would not only not survive the war, she also wouldn't survive 1942. On October 26, 1942, Hornet and Enterprise fought in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, where Hornet was attacked by torpedo bombers and traditional bombers, and power was knocked out to her engines. The Japanese aircraft then went after the Enterprise, allowing the heavy cruiser USS Northampton, which sank on December 1st, 1942, to take Hornet under tow. Just as power was about to be restored, 9 torpedo bombers this time attacked Hornet. While 8 missed, number 9 didn't and found its mark, doing even more damage to the heavily damaged but already repaired electrical system. With word on an advancing Japanese fleet, she was ordered to be sunk, as she could not be pulled free in time before the Japanese would catch up to her. 9 American torpedoes failed to sink her. Classically, many just failed to explode, as so many during World War II did. Destroyers Mustin and Anderson shot more than 400 5-inch rounds at the Hornet, but left when Japanese forces entered the area. The Japanese then used 4 torpedoes to finally sink the Hornet, which was the last American carrier ever sunk. That was a fleet carrier. Escort carriers, however, would continue having fairly heavy losses throughout World War II. She was sunk early in the morning on October 27, 1942, with the loss of 140 of her 2,200 sailors. Only one less loss than her sister, but both fairly low casualty rates, so that's at least a plus. So, what about her final sister, the middle and most loved? The Big E, Lucky E, the Galloping Ghost, and the Grey Ghost, aka the mighty, most decorated American warship in history, the USS Enterprise CV-6, built by Newport News Shipbuilding like her 2 fallen sisters. She was laid down on July 16, 1934, launched on October 3, 1936, and commissioned on October 3, 1938, exactly 2 years later. During World War II, she would be the first American ship to sink a full-sized enemy warship in the Pacific War, sinking submarine I-70 on December 10, 1941, 3 days after Pearl Harbor. 3 times during the war, the Japanese said she was sunk, but she never was, getting the nickname the Grey Ghost. By war's end, she became an absolute menace. She and her planes shot down 911 enemy planes, sunk 71 ships, and damaged and destroyed another 192 more. She was an absolute menace to those who opposed her, or sunk her sisters. Her many honors are as follows: Presidential Unit Citation, Navy Unit Commendation, American Defense Service Medal, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with, just a few more than her sister, 20 battle stars, the most in American history, the World War II Victory Medal, the Philippine Presidential Unit Citation, the Philippine Liberation Medal, and she even got a British Admiralty pendant as a token of respect. The mighty Enterprise was finally decommissioned on February 17, 1947, and stricken on October 2, 1956. Despite attempts to preserve her, they all failed, as nobody raised enough money to buy her from the Navy after plans to transfer her to the state of New York fell through in 1949. The Navy sold her for scrap on July 1, 1958, with scrapping completed in May of 1960, committing, in many people's eyes, a crime against history and a crime against the American people. However, at least we do have bits and pieces to remember her by. Her bell is at the U.S. Naval Academy and is often heard ringing. Her commissioning plaque and one of her anchors are on display at the Washington Navy Yard, and her stern nameplate was on display near Little League in Rivervale, New Jersey, until 2025, when it was refurbished and put on display next to the mighty Iowa-class fast battleship, the USS New Jersey, and will be until the National Museum of the U.S. Navy is completed. 4 portholes on USS Enterprise CVN-65, her much later successor, will now be transferred to USS Enterprise CVN-80, all 4 of which were originally from the Enterprise herself, when its construction at least gets far enough. So, in a recap, Yorktown and Hornet were both lost in 1942, but Enterprise went to make the Japanese pay for sinking her 2 sisters, and being just an absolute menace. We have nothing from Yorktown and Hornet, but we do have some artifacts from the menace herself, the USS Enterprise. And while, in a lot of people's opinions, including mine, it's a crime she wasn't preserved, at least some items are better than none, and much better than her 2 sisters. And in a way, what's left of her really does honor both her 2 sisters, and all of those who fought and died during World War II. Sure, no ship may be preserved of the class, but they are often remembered, as all 3 are not only famous, but they were the first class of American aircraft carriers built as a class, and numbers 2, 3, and 4 of purpose-built American aircraft carriers. All 3, especially the USS Enterprise, the menace herself, deserve to be remembered.